I'm Clara, I'm 28 years old, and I am, for all intents and purposes, an orphan by choice. This wasn't a title I ever sought, but one that was thrust upon me by the very people who should have been my safe harbor. It was finalized the moment my family told me their luxury vacation was for the ones who matter, and then had the audacity to charge my credit card $7,200 to pay for it. The story of how they ended up stranded at the cruise terminal, or how they later tried to break down my garage door, is really just the final chapter of a book that was written over the course of my entire life. To understand the end, you have to understand the beginning. My family operates on an unspoken caste system. There's my mother, Brenda, the matriarch who rules with a steel will and a wallet that was rarely her own. My father, David, is her silent, passive partner, a man who learned long ago that peace in his house was purchased with his compliance. Then there's my younger brother, Leo, the golden child, the one for whom the sun rose and set. His wife, Megan, fit into the family seamlessly, adopting their sense of entitlement as if it were her own birthright. And then there was me. I wasn't the scapegoat, not exactly. I was worse. I was the family utility. I was the emergency fund, the reliable backup plan, the one they called when things went wrong, and the one they forgot when things were going right. The pattern was established early. The first truly significant example happened when I was 22. I had just landed my first job as a junior financial analyst, a position I had worked tirelessly for through college, balancing internships and late-night study sessions. The starting salary felt like a fortune, a testament to the future I was so carefully trying to build for myself, away from the subtle financial chaos that always seemed to hum in the background of my childhood home. About a month into my new job, my mother called me, her voice laced with a practiced, honey-sweet panic. "Clara, honey, we have a bit of a situation. It's about Leo's tuition." I felt a familiar knot tighten in my stomach. Leo was in his final year of a liberal arts degree, a degree he'd changed twice, extending his stay at the university while my parents footed the bill. "What's wrong?" I asked, already knowing the answer would involve a request. "Well, there was a mix-up with the financial aid forms," she explained, the details deliberately vague. "We're short for his final semester payment, just by a few thousand. We were wondering, since you're doing so well now, if you could possibly see your way to helping your brother out." The amount was $4,000. It was more than half of my savings, the nest egg I was meticulously building to get my own apartment and finally move out. I hesitated, explaining my own financial goals. Her tone shifted instantly from sweet to sharp. "Clara, this is your brother's future. Are you really going to put a silly apartment deposit ahead of your own family? We'll pay you back, of course, the moment our finances are sorted out." My father got on the line, his voice soft and full of disappointment. "We've always been there for you, Clara. It's what families do. We support each other." The weight of their collective expectation was suffocating. They spoke of support, but it was a one-way street. I had never asked for anything, knowing better than to even try. I paid for my own car, my own tuition through scholarships and loans, my own books. Leo got a car for his 18th birthday. His tuition was a given. Yet, I was the one who was selfish for hesitating. Against my better judgment, I transferred the money. It was a significant blow to my plans, but the relief in my mother's voice made me feel, for a fleeting moment, like a valued member of the family. Of course, they never paid me back. When I gently brought it up 6 months later, my mother acted offended. "Goodness, Clara, are you keeping a tally? We're family. The money helped all of us by helping Leo. You should be happy you were in a position to do that for him." The topic was never spoken of again, and my $4,000 was absorbed into the family ether, a silent tax for my independence. The second monument to my familial status came 4 years later. By then, I was 26 and had been promoted to a senior analyst position. My firm held an annual awards ceremony, and I won a prestigious award for a portfolio I had managed, one that had yielded exceptional returns for our clients. It was the proudest moment of my professional life. My boss had sung my praises, and I felt a sense of accomplishment that was mine and mine alone. My parents insisted on taking me out to dinner to celebrate. I was naive enough to feel a spark of hope. Perhaps now, with such a clear and public validation of my success, they would finally see me. I invited them to my favorite restaurant, a quiet Italian place. The evening started well enough. They congratulated me, though my Others' smile didn't quite reach her eyes. But as soon as the appetizers arrived, the conversation shifted. "Speaking of promotions," my mother said, turning to my father with a broad, genuine smile. "Did we tell you, Clara? Leo got a promotion at work." I turned to my brother. "Oh, that's great, Leo. Congratulations. What's the new role?" Leo puffed out his chest. "Assistant manager of the sporting goods department," he announced, as if he'd just been named CEO. He worked at a big box retail store, a job he'd held for a few years without much ambition. For the rest of the evening, my award was completely forgotten. My mother prompted Leo to tell every story he could think of about his job. She asked him about his new responsibilities, his team, the discount he now received. My father listened with rapt attention, nodding and asking follow-up questions. Megan, Leo's wife, chimed in with how proud she was and how this was just the beginning for him. My achievement, the very reason for the dinner, became a footnote. They didn't ask about my work, about the challenges I'd overcome, or about what the award meant for my career. I sat there, pushing pasta around my plate, feeling invisible. It wasn't that I begrudged Leo his small success. It was the stark, painful contrast in their reactions. His minor step-up was a cause for a grand celebration. My major career milestone was a mere conversation starter, quickly discarded in favor of the golden child. I drove home that night with a hollow feeling in my chest, the beautiful glass award sitting on my passenger seat feeling more like a paperweight than a trophy. The final, and perhaps most telling, pattern was the annual ritual of Christmas. Every year it was the same. We'd gather at my parents' house. Leo and Megan would receive a mountain of lavish gifts, new electronics, designer clothes, weekend getaway packages. My parents would spare no expense. My gifts, on the other hand, were always an afterthought. One year, I received a generic gift basket with stale crackers and soaps I was allergic to, clearly a regift. The next, it was a single, lonely-looking gift card to a coffee shop. The year before the cruise incident was the worst. I had spent weeks picking out thoughtful, personal gifts for everyone. I got my dad a first-edition copy of his favorite book, my mom a custom-made necklace with her birthstone, and Leo and Megan a high-end cooking class, as they were supposedly aspiring foodies. They opened them with polite, distracted thank yous before turning their attention back to their own pile of presents. My gift from them was a single envelope. Inside was a $50 gift card to a gas station. My mother handed it to me with a dismissive wave. "Here, Clara, we know you're always so busy driving around for that important job of yours." Leo snickered. "Yeah, at least you'll get some use out of it." The sting wasn't about the monetary value. It was about the utter lack of thought. It was a gift you give a mail carrier or a distant cousin. It was a transaction. It sent a clear message. You are an obligation we have to check off a list. That evening, as I watched them all laughing together, basking in the glow of the Christmas tree and their mutual affection, I felt a profound sense of alienation. I was in the room, but I wasn't with them. I was a ghost at their feast. These weren't isolated incidents. They were the building blocks of the wall that had been steadily rising between us for years. I was the responsible one, the stable one, the one who didn't need anything. And because I didn't need anything, I was never given anything. Not money, not attention, not even basic consideration. My success wasn't a source of pride for them. It was a resource. A resource they were about to tap in the most flagrant and insulting way imaginable. The family dinner was announced with my mother's usual flair for manufactured importance. It was a Tuesday evening, and she called me at work. "Clara, darling," she began, her voice brimming with a performative excitement that always set my teeth on edge. "We're having a special family dinner on Sunday. You simply must be there. We have the most wonderful news to share." I knew better than to think the news had anything to do with me. Their family news was always Leo-centric. Still, A part of me, a foolish, hopeful part I couldn't seem to kill, whispered that maybe this time would be different. "Okay, Mom, I'll be there. What's the occasion?" "Oh, you'll see," she chirped, enjoying the suspense. "Just be at our house at 6, and try to be on time, dear." The week crawled by under a cloud of mild dread and that flicker of stupid hope. I arrived at my parents' house at exactly 6 o'clock on Sunday, a bottle of wine in hand as a peace offering. The moment I stepped inside, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Leo and Megan were already there, practically vibrating with smug energy. My father was pottering around the kitchen, and my mother was presiding over the living room like a queen holding court. "Clara, you made it," she said, as if my punctuality were a delightful surprise. Dinner was a tense affair. The conversation was all light, meaningless chatter, but underneath it, a current of excitement flowed between everyone but me. They kept exchanging knowing glances, small smiles that I wasn't privy to. I felt like a spectator who had wandered into a private party. Finally, after the main course plates were cleared, my mother clinked her glass with a spoon. "All right," she announced, her eyes sparkling. "I know you're all dying to hear our little secret." She paused for dramatic effect, beaming at Leo and Megan. "Your father and I have decided it's high time we had a proper family vacation, a real one, so we've booked a 10-day luxury cruise to Hawaii." Megan squealed with delight and threw her arms around Leo. My father looked genuinely happy, a relaxed smile on his face. "It's all arranged," he said, looking at my mother proudly. "Flights, the cruise itself, excursions at every port, the works." For a moment, I was genuinely happy for them. It did sound wonderful. They hadn't taken a real vacation in years, always complaining about the cost. "Wow, Mom, Dad, that's amazing," I said, a real smile spreading across my face. "A Hawaiian cruise sounds incredible. When is it?" My question hung in the air, suddenly heavy. The joyous atmosphere faltered. My mother's smile became a little tighter, a little more strained. Megan stopped stroking Leo's arm and looked down at her lap. My father suddenly found a spot on the tablecloth that required his full attention. It was my mother who broke the silence. Her voice, which had been so full of warmth moments before, was now cool and clinical. "The departure is in 3 weeks' time from the port in the city." She didn't look at me as she spoke. She was addressing the room, a room I was suddenly no longer a part of. A cold dread began to creep up my spine. 3 weeks, okay. I should be able to get the time off work, I said, my voice sounding unnaturally high. "I'll have to check my project schedule, but—" "Oh, Clara," my mother cut me off, her tone dripping with false pity. She finally looked at me, her expression one of someone delivering difficult but necessary news. "Honey, I think there's been a misunderstanding." I stared at her, my mind refusing to process what was happening. A misunderstanding. She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for my inevitable, unreasonable reaction. "We didn't book a ticket for you." The words landed like stones in the quiet room. I could feel Leo's smug gaze on me, enjoying my discomfort. I looked from my mother's cold face to my father's averted eyes. He wouldn't meet my gaze. He just continued to stare at that imaginary spot on the tablecloth, his silence a deafening form of consent. You didn't book me a ticket," I stammered, my heart starting to pound. "But it's a family vacation." My mother reached across the table and patted my hand in a gesture that was meant to look comforting but felt condescending. "Sweetheart, please don't make this difficult. It's just, this trip is very expensive. It's for the ones who matter, the core family." The ones who matter. The phrase echoed in my head, a brutal, stunning blow, the core family. Her, my father, Leo, and Megan. I was not core. I was peripheral. I was an attachment, easily removed. I pulled my hand back from hers as if her touch had burned me. "The ones who matter," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. All the air had been sucked out of the room. "And I don't matter." "Now, don't be so dramatic," she snapped, her patience wearing thin now that the carefully constructed facade was cracking. "It's not like that. You know what I mean." Leo and Megan are building their life together. They're part of the future. Your father and I wanted to do this for them. You're so independent, so busy with your career. We didn't think you'd even want to come." The hypocrisy was breathtaking. They used my independence as a reason to exclude me, even as they had relied on the fruits of that independence time and time again. The $4,000 for Leo's tuition. The countless small loans that were never repaid. The expectation that I was always available to solve their problems. "You didn't think I'd want to come?" I asked, my voice gaining a dangerous edge of clarity. "You didn't ask me, you just decided for me. You decided I don't matter." Leo, who had been silent until now, scoffed. "Oh, here we go. Don't ruin a happy announcement, Clara. It's not always about you. Mom's right, this is for the real family. You're never around anyway." "I'm never around because I'm working," I shot back, my voice rising. "Working to pay for a life that you all seem to think you have a claim on whenever it suits you." "That's enough," my father said, finally looking up, his face flushed. His voice wasn't angry, it was pleading. He was pleading with me to drop it, to swallow the insult, to do what I had always done, maintain the peace at my own expense. I looked at their faces. My mother's set and stubborn, my brother's smug and triumphant, his wife's a mask of indifference, and my father's weak and pleading. There was no remorse, no regret, just the firm, unshakable belief that their decision was justified. They had amputated me from the family and were now annoyed that I was bleeding on their clean floor. I stood up, my chair scraping harshly against the wood. "You know what? You're right," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and profound sorrow. "You are absolutely right. I don't matter. Thank you for making that so clear." I turned and walked out of the dining room, grabbing my purse and keys from the hall table. I didn't look back. I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't care. As I closed the front door behind me, the sound of their sudden, cheerful chatter resuming before the lock had even clicked shut was the final, twisting knife. They were already moving on, my absence a minor inconvenience that had passed. The celebration could now continue, unimpeded by the feelings of the one who didn't matter. I sat in my car for a long time in the driveway, the bottle of wine I'd brought still on their table, a bitter symbol of my misplaced hope. The tears didn't come. I was too cold, too hollowed out for that. All I felt was a quiet, chilling certainty that something had been broken for good. The days following that disastrous dinner were shrouded in a thick, insulating silence. No one called, no one texted. It was as if, by walking out that door, I had simply ceased to exist. In a way, it was a relief. The fragile hope I'd harbored for so long had finally been extinguished, and in its place was the cold, hard clarity of the truth. I poured myself into my work, finding solace in the neat, predictable world of spreadsheets and market projections. Numbers didn't lie. They didn't have hidden motives or offer backhanded compliments. Their value was absolute. I was working late one evening, about a week after the announcement, trying to untangle a particularly complex financial model. My phone, lying face down on my desk, buzzed with a notification. I ignored it, focused on the screen in front of me. A few seconds later, it buzzed again. An email. I sighed, assuming it was another work query, and picked it up. It was from my credit card company. The subject line was standard: "Your recent transaction summary." I almost deleted it without reading, but then I saw the second email, which had arrived just after. The subject line of that one read, "Fraud alert, unusual activity detected on your account." My heart skipped a beat. I'd never received a fraud alert before. I was meticulous with my finances. I immediately opened the second email. "Dear Clara," it began, "for your protection, we are verifying a recent high-value transaction made on your card. A payment of $7,200 was processed to Oceanic Breeze Cruises. If you authorize this transaction, no action is needed. If you do not recognize this charge, please contact us immediately." I stared at the screen, the numbers blurring in front of my eyes. $7,200, Oceanic Breeze Cruises. It couldn't be, it was a mistake. Some kind of clerical error, a crossed wire in the vast, invisible world of digital payments. They wouldn't. They couldn't possibly. My hands trembling slightly, I opened my credit card app. I navigated to the recent transactions list, my breath held tight in my chest. And there it was, pending but undeniably there. A single charge for $7,200. The vendor name was clear as day. The air rushed out of my lungs. I felt a wave of dizziness, and I had to grip the edge of my desk to steady myself. It wasn't a mistake. They had done it. My family, my mother, I was sure it was her, had told me to my face that I wasn't important enough to be included on their precious trip, and then they had turned around and used my money to fund it. How? The question screamed in my mind. Then the memory surfaced, sharp and sickening. About a year ago, my father had a minor health scare. It was a Saturday morning, and he needed to go to an urgent care clinic. My parents, in a perpetual state of self-inflicted financial precarity, didn't have a credit card with a high enough limit to cover the initial diagnostic fees. My mother had called me in a panic. I'd rushed over to the clinic and paid the bill, a little over $1,000. To make things easier for potential follow-up appointments, my mother had insisted we put my card on file with her in her wallet, just for emergencies. "It's just so we have it, honey. In case something happens and we can't reach you," she had said. I, trusting and foolish, had agreed. I'd long since forgotten about it, assuming the slip of paper she wrote the numbers on W as lost or thrown away. Clearly, it had been carefully saved. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was staggering. It was a betrayal on a level I couldn't have conceived of. This wasn't a cry for help or a desperate, last-minute emergency. This was a calculated, premeditated act of theft, shrouded in the language of family entitlement. They had weaponized my past generosity against me. They had looked at my success, my stability, my responsible nature, and had seen nothing but a bank to be robbed. The phrase, "for the ones who matter," took on a new, sinister meaning. They mattered enough to go on the trip. I mattered enough to pay for it. My first impulse was pure, white-hot rage. I wanted to call my mother and scream. I wanted to unleash every ounce of hurt and anger I had suppressed for years. I imagined the conversation, my accusations, her denials, the gaslighting. She would claim it was a mistake. She'd say she grabbed the wrong card. Then, when pressed, she would pivot to martyrdom. She'd cry and wail about how much pressure she was under, how I was so successful and they had so little, how I was being selfish and cruel to hold it over her head. My father would get on the phone and beg me to just let it go for the sake of peace. Leo would send me a text calling me a monster for upsetting our mother. I had played this scene out in smaller-scale dramas my entire life. I knew the script by heart. And as I sat there in the quiet solitude of my office, the rage began to cool, replaced by something else. A steely, Arctic resolve. What would a fight accomplish? It would give them the drama they craved. It would give them the opportunity to twist the narrative, to paint me as the villain. It would end with me, emotionally battered and exhausted, likely giving in just to make it stop. They were counting on that. They were counting on my lifelong habit of capitulation. They had made a $7,200 bet that I would, once again, swallow my pain and pay the price for their happiness. This time, they were wrong. A strange sense of calm settled over me. I looked at the charge on my phone screen. It was still pending. The money hadn't officially left my account yet. The tickets were booked, but the transaction wasn't finalized. I had time. Confrontation was their weapon of choice. It was a messy, emotional battlefield where they held every advantage, but I was a financial analyst. My world was one of logic, of systems, of quiet, decisive actions that had clear and predictable consequences. I didn't have to fight them on their terms. I didn't have to fight them at all. I didn't have to scream or cry or plead my case. I didn't need their apology or their admission of guilt. The credit card company had already offered me the solution in their email. "If you do not recognize this charge, please contact us immediately." It was a fraudulent charge, and fraudulent charges could be reversed. The reservations tied to that charge could be undone. A slow smile spread across my face. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had just found the master key after a lifetime of being locked out. They had made their move on the open field of family drama. I would make mine in the quiet, sterile world of corporate policy and banking regulations. They would never see it coming. They had started a war, assuming I would use the same old, ineffective weapons. But I was bringing a different arsenal. I wasn't going to have a fight. I was going to perform a surgical, silent, and utterly devastating cancellation. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The usual fog of resentment and resignation was gone, burned away by the cold fury of the previous night. I didn't go to work. I called in, taking a personal day, and made myself a pot of strong coffee. My kitchen table became my command center. My first call was to my credit card company. I took a deep, steadying breath and dialed the number on the back of my card. When a cheerful-sounding agent named Maria answered, I kept my voice calm and professional, just as if I were speaking to a client. "Good morning," I said. "I'm calling about a fraud alert I received yesterday. There is a charge on my account that I did not authorize." "I can certainly help you with that," Maria said, her tone reassuring. "Can you please verify the transaction amount and the vendor?" "The amount is $7,200, I replied, the number tasting like poison. "The vendor is listed as Oceanic Breeze Cruises." I could hear the clicking of her keyboard. "Okay, I see the charge right here. You're confirming that you did not make or approve this purchase." "That is correct," I said, a sense of power beginning to build in my chest. "I have never done business with that company. I believe my card information was stolen and used fraudulently." It wasn't even a lie. My information had been stolen from a place of trust, and exploited. "I'm very sorry." "To hear that, ma'am," Maria said. "We'll open a fraud investigation right away. We will, of course, remove the charge from your account, and it will be reversed in full. For your security, I will need to cancel this card immediately and issue you a new one. It will arrive in 3 to 5 business days." "Thank you, Maria. I appreciate that," I said. The first domino had fallen, the money was safe. That was step one. But I wasn't finished. Simply getting my money back wasn't enough. That would solve my problem, but it wouldn't address the core issue. If I just reversed the charge, the cruise line would eventually contact my family for a new form of payment. My mother would call me, feigning ignorance and panic, and the whole dramatic cycle would begin. I needed to do more than just protect my finances. I needed to dismantle the situation they had created. After hanging up with the credit card company, I looked up the customer service number for Oceanic Breeze Cruises. This call was more difficult. I wasn't just a cardholder here. I was meddling in a reservation that wasn't in my name. I needed to be careful. A friendly man named Gary answered. "Thank you for calling Oceanic Breeze. This is Gary. How can I help you have a wonderful day?" "Hello, Gary," I started, choosing my words with care. "I'm calling about a reservation that was recently booked. I believe it was paid for with a stolen credit card." Gary's cheerful demeanor immediately turned serious. "Oh my, I'm very sorry to hear that. Do you have the reservation number?" "I don't," I said truthfully, "but the card used for the purchase was mine. The booking would have been made in the last few days for 4 passengers, under the names Brenda, David, Leo, and Megan." I spelled out each name for him. The charge was for $7,200. More keyboard clicking. "Okay, yes, I've found it," he said after a moment. "A 10-day Hawaiian sailing, departing in 2 weeks. I see the payment was just made. You're saying the card was used without your authorization." "That is correct," I affirmed. "I have already reported it as a fraudulent transaction to my credit card company, and they are reversing the payment." "I understand completely," Gary said. "Company policy in cases of fraudulent payment is very clear. The booking is considered void. I will cancel the reservation for all 4 passengers immediately. This includes their stateroom, their flight package, and all associated port excursions." My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. "So, to be clear," I said, needing to hear the words, "the reservation for Brenda, David, Leo, and Megan is now canceled." Yes, ma'am, canceled in full. There is no longer any booking for them in our system. Any confirmation emails or e-tickets they may have received are now invalid. I could have wept with relief. Thank you, Gary, you've been very helpful. After hanging up, I sat in silence for a full minute, letting the reality of what I had done sink in. I had quietly and efficiently erased their entire vacation. There were no more flights, no more cruise ship waiting for them, no more ocean view stateroom. It had all vanished into the digital ether, undone with a few calm, polite phone calls. There was no shouting, no drama, just a clean, surgical cut. My final action was the simplest. I went into my credit card app. The physical card was already canceled, but for good measure, I found the feature that allowed me to freeze the account. I toggled the switch. A small padlock icon appeared next to my card number. Card frozen. Even if they had the numbers, they were now completely useless. It was over. The trap I'd laid was set, silent and invisible. A strange cocktail of emotions washed over me. There was a fierce, triumphant satisfaction, a feeling of having finally stood up for myself. But underneath it, there was a profound and aching sadness. This shouldn't have been necessary. This wasn't a game. These were my parents, my brother. A family is supposed to be a circle of trust, and mine was a den of thieves. Taking these steps felt less like revenge and more like an act of survival, like a cornered animal finally using its claws. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in a state of suspended animation. The silence from my family continued, but it was no longer a relief. It was the quiet before a storm. I knew they were blissfully unaware, packing their bags, buying sunscreen, looking at photos of Hawaiian sunsets online. They were probably laughing about how they had pulled one over on dependable old Clara. The thought sent a shiver of cold dread and righteous anger through me. Every day that passed, my resolve hardened. They had built this pedestal of lies and entitlement, and I was no longer willing to stand by and watch them admire the view. I was about to let them see just how far the fall would be. The morning of their supposed departure arrived with a gray, overcast sky. That perfectly matched my mood. I had barely slept, my mind a whirlwind of anxiety and anticipation. The cruise ship was scheduled to leave port at 4:00 p.m., which meant they would likely be heading to the terminal sometime in the late morning. I woke up at dawn, the house unnaturally quiet, my phone lying face up on my nightstand like an unexploded ordnance. I went through the motions of a normal morning, but everything felt surreal. I made coffee, but the taste was flat. I turned on the news, but the words were just noise. My entire being was coiled tight, waiting. Every car that drove down my street made my head snap up. Every notification on my phone sent a jolt through my nervous system. I was a bundle of raw, exposed nerves. Part of me felt sick with guilt, a lifetime of conditioning whispering that I was being cruel. But another, stronger part of me knew this was a necessary amputation. The limb was poisoned, saving it was no longer an option. The hours ticked by with excruciating slowness. 9:00 a.m., 10:00 a.m., 11:00 a.m. Silence. I imagined them packing the car, my father meticulously arranging the suitcases, my mother checking her list for the 10th time, Leo and Megan taking selfies, captioning them vacation mode. The thought was so vivid, so infuriating, it solidified my resolve. Then, just as I was starting to think maybe something had gone wrong with my plan, that somehow they'd figured it out, my phone buzzed. It was a text message from my mother. The timestamp read 6:17 a.m. I realized with a jolt they must have been on a much earlier flight to the port city than I'd imagined. My hands trembled as I read the words on the screen. "We're stuck, they won't let us on." The message was so simple, so devoid of the usual bluster. It was the flat, bewildered statement of someone whose reality has just crumbled. I could picture the scene perfectly. The four of them at the airline check-in counter, their luggage piled around them, the chipper airline agent giving them a polite, apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, I don't see any reservation under those names." The confusion turning to indignation. My mother demanding to speak to a manager. Leo getting red-faced and belligerent. My father trying to shrink into the background. I stared at the text message, a wave of emotions so powerful it almost knocked the breath from my lungs. There was a surge of dark, vindictive triumph. It had worked. My quiet, meticulous plan had played out exactly as I'd intended. They were stranded, confused, and humiliated. But alongside the triumph was a deep, guttural pang of grief. This was my family. A family I had, at one point, loved without question, and I had just brought this moment of chaos down upon them. The victory felt hollow, the satisfaction tainted with sorrow. My phone buzzed again, another text from my mother. "Clara, answer me. The airline says the tickets were canceled. They said the cruise was canceled too. What is going on? Did you do something?" The accusation was there, but it was still couched in disbelief. She couldn't yet bring herself to believe I would actually do it. She still thought she held all the power. I took a deep breath. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard. I could have lied. I could have feigned ignorance, dragged it out, made them squirm. But I was done with games. I was done with hints and subtleties. They had dealt me a crushing, explicit blow with their words. This trip is for the ones who matter. It was only fitting that my response be just as clear. I typed my reply, my fingers steady. "Correct, I don't matter, remember." I hit send. The moment the message delivered, my phone began to ring. It was my mother. I watched her name flash on the screen, my thumb hovering over the decline button. I pressed it. A second later, a call from my father. I declined it. Then Leo. Declined, Megan declined. Then the text started pouring in, a frantic, escalating torrent of rage and disbelief. From Mom, "How could you do this to us? You selfish, vindictive child, you've ruined everything." From Leo, "You are dead to me, dead. I hope you're happy, you miserable witch." From Dad, "Clara, please call me. We need to sort this out. Your mother is hysterical." From Megan, "I can't believe you. After everything this family has done for you, you are a horrible person." I read each message, and with each one the sadness receded and the certainty grew. Everything this family has done for you. The words were so twisted, so divorced from reality that they were almost laughable. They had done nothing but take. They had treated me as their personal ATM and emotional punching bag, and now they were outraged that the ATM was finally out of service. I turned my phone onto silent mode and set it face down on the table. The buzzing stopped. The house was quiet again, but this quiet was different. It wasn't the tense, expectant quiet from before. It was a calm, peaceful quiet. The storm had broken, and I was still standing. I had taken their worst, and I had survived. The war wasn't over, I suspected, but the most important battle had just been won, and I hadn't had to raise my voice. I had won it with a single, devastatingly honest sentence. The day after the airport fiasco was eerily quiet. I had expected more angry texts, perhaps a series of scathing voicemails, but there was nothing. The silence was unnerving. It felt less like an ending and more like they were regrouping, planning their next assault. I spent the day on edge, jumping at every sound, peering through my blinds at every car that passed. I knew my family, and I knew my mother. She would not accept this defeat lying down. Her humiliation at the airport would be festering, metastasizing into a furious need for confrontation. The next morning, my fears were realized. I was in my home office, trying to catch up on work, when I heard the sound of a car pulling aggressively into my driveway. I glanced out the window and my blood ran cold. It was my father's car. All four of them, my mother, father, Leo, and Megan, piled out. They looked exhausted, disheveled, and incandescent with rage. My mother marched up to my front door and began hammering on it with her fist. "Clara, open this door right now. You will face us, you coward." Leo joined her, kicking at the base of the door. "Get out here, Clara. You think you can just steal our vacation and hide." The irony of him accusing me of stealing was so profound it would have been comical under any other circumstances. I backed away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I retreated to the living room, my phone clutched in my shaking hand. Their shouting grew louder, more frantic. I could hear my father's voice, a low murmur trying to inject reason, but he was completely drowned out by the others. Then, the sound changed. I heard a loud metallic bang from the side of the house, and another. I crept to the side window that looked out over my driveway and my detached garage. My jaw dropped. Leo, his face purple with rage, was ramming his shoulder against the side door of my garage. My mother was cheering him on, while Megan was trying to pry at the window frame with something she'd grabbed from the garden. They were trying to break in. That was it. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a home invasion. The last thread of familial obligation, the last vestige of sentimental attachment, snapped. These were not my family. They were intruders. They were a threat. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely unlock my phone. I fumbled with the screen and dialed 911. 911, what is your emergency? A calm, female voice answered. Hello, I stammered, my voice a choked whisper. My family is trying to break into my house. They're trying to kick down my garage door. Okay, ma'am, can you give me your address? I gave her my address, my voice shaking. Please hurry, I'm alone and I'm scared. Police are on their way, ma'am. Can you stay on the line with me? Are you in a safe location? I'm in my living room. They're outside. I don't think they can get into the house, but they're destroying my property. The dispatcher kept me on the line, her calm voice a lifeline in my sea of panic. The banging and shouting outside continued, a relentless assault on my home and my sanity. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably only 5 or 6 minutes before I heard the blessed, beautiful sound of sirens approaching. The sight of 2 police cruisers pulling into my street, lights flashing, was one of the most profound reliefs of my life. The banging stopped abruptly. I watched through the blinds as 2 officers got out of their cars and approached my family, who were now standing in the middle of the driveway looking flustered and indignant. I saw my mother immediately launch into a dramatic, gesticulating performance. I couldn't hear her words, but I could imagine them. This is all a misunderstanding, officer. This is our daughter's house. She's mentally unstable. She stole our vacation money, and now she won't talk to us. One of the officers held up a hand, stopping her mid-tirade. He spoke into his radio, and a moment later, my phone rang. It was the police department, telling me the officers were at my door and it was safe to come out. I took a deep breath, unlocked my front door, and stepped outside. The 4 of them stood huddled on the lawn, looking at me with pure hatred. My mother's face was a mask of fury. Leo looked like he wanted to lunge at me. The 2 officers, a man and a woman, stood between us, a solid, professional barrier. The male officer addressed me. Ma'am, are you Clara? Yes, officer, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. This is your property. Yes. And these people do not live here with you? No, they do not. He turned to my mother. Ma'am, we received a call about a break-in attempt. Your daughter says you were trying to kick in her garage door. My mother scoffed, her voice dripping with venom. It's a family matter. She stole from us. She canceled our family vacation out of spite. We just wanted to talk to her. Ma'am, attempting to force entry into a private residence is not talking, the female officer said, her tone firm and brooks no argument. That's a crime. The side of that garage door is dented, and there are pry marks on the window. Do you understand the seriousness of this? My father finally spoke up, his face pale. Officers, please, this is just a big misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, Dad, I said, my voice ringing out with a strength I didn't know I possessed. I looked directly at my mother. You tried to steal $7,000 from me. You were told I wasn't invited, that I didn't matter. When I refused to be your bank, you came to my home and tried to break it down. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a crime. The officer looked from my face to theirs, his expression hardening as he assessed the situation. He saw my calm, factual demeanor and their sputtering, emotional rage. You have 5 minutes to leave this property, he said to my family. You are not to contact this woman. You are not to set foot on her property again. If we are called back here today or any other day, we will make arrests for trespassing and harassment. Is that clear? My mother opened her mouth to argue, but Leo pulled her arm. For the first time, he looked scared. The reality of the flashing lights and the stern, uniformed officers had finally penetrated his thick skull of entitlement. They shuffled back to their car, shooting daggers at me over their shoulders. As they drove away, my mother glared at me from the passenger seat, her expression one of pure, undiluted malice. It was the last I would see of her face to face. The police stayed until they were long gone, and before leaving, the female officer handed me a card. "Ma'am," she said kindly, "given the situation, you may want to consider going to the courthouse tomorrow and filing for a restraining order. This doesn't seem like a situation that's going to resolve itself peacefully." I looked at the card, then at my dented garage door. She was right. This wasn't the end. It was an escalation. They had crossed a line from which there was no return. They had brought their rage and violence to my doorstep. The police had been my shield today, but I knew, with chilling certainty, that I needed a more permanent one. After the police left, an unnerving silence descended upon my house, even deeper than before. The adrenaline that had surged through me during the confrontation drained away, leaving behind a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. I walked over to the garage and ran my fingers over the dent in the metal door. It was a tangible symbol of their rage, a permanent scar on my home. Looking at it, I knew the officer was right. This couldn't be a one-time intervention. They had shown me who they truly were, and I had to believe them. The "and then I," from the Reddit title I had imagined writing, was no longer a question. It was a clear, necessary, and heartbreaking path forward. The next morning, I drove to the county courthouse. The building itself was intimidating, all marble floors and solemn, echoing halls. It felt like a place for endings, a place where ties were formally and legally severed. I found the clerk's office for protective orders, my heart a heavy stone in my chest. Each step felt like a betrayal of the family ideal I had once cherished, but a confirmation of the reality I now faced. I took a number and sat on a hard, wooden bench, surrounded by other people whose faces were etched with fear, sadness, and anger. Their stories were their own, but I felt a silent kinship with them. We were all there because someone who was supposed to be a source of love had become a source of fear. When my number was called, I approached the counter and spoke to a clerk, a woman with kind, weary eyes who had clearly seen it all. "I need to file for a restraining order," I said, my voice quiet. "Against whom?" she asked, sliding a thick packet of forms across the counter. "Against my mother, my father, my brother, and my sister-in-law," I replied. She didn't even blink. She just nodded and handed me a pen. "Fill these out as completely and factually as you can. Be specific about the incidents. Dates, times, what was said, what was done. Include the police report number from yesterday if you have it." I took the packet back to the bench and began to write. It was the hardest thing I'd ever had to put on paper. I detailed the history of financial exploitation, quoting my mother's words from the dinner. "This trip is for the ones who matter." I described the fraudulent $7,200 charge. I chronicled the airport incident and the barrage of threatening text messages. Finally, with a shaking hand, I wrote about them showing up at my home, banging on my door, and the attempt to break into my garage. I attached the police incident number the officer had given me. Every word was a small death. It was the process of taking all the chaotic, painful emotions and distilling them into cold, hard facts for a judge to read. There was no room for nuance, no space for the lingering sadness or the ghost of the love I once had for them. It was just a stark record of harassment and threat. After an hour, I was finished. I handed the packet back to the clerk, my hands feeling strangely light. She reviewed it, stamped it, and gave me a court date for a temporary hearing. "The sheriff will serve them with the temporary order," she explained. "Until the hearing, they are legally forbidden from contacting you or coming within 500 feet of you, your home, or your workplace. Do you understand?" I nodded, unable to speak. The legal machinery was now in motion, drawing a clear, enforceable line in the sand. Walking out of the courthouse and into the bright sunlight, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollowed out, as if I had just presided over a funeral. In a way, I had. It was the funeral for my family. The family I had was gone, replaced by the 4 angry people whose names were now listed on a protective order. The hearing a week later was a formality. They didn't even show up. The judge read my statement, reviewed the police report, and granted a permanent restraining order for a period of 3 years. Just like that, it was done. My family was legally barred from my life. The weeks that followed were strange. My life became quiet. The constant, low-grade hum of anxiety I'd lived with for years began to fade. I no longer checked my phone with a sense of dread. I no longer rehearsed conversations in my head. I began to repair the dent in my garage door, a symbolic act of healing my own space. The silence they left behind was vast, but it wasn't empty. It was filled with peace. It was filled with the freedom to be myself, without judgment or expectation. It was the freedom to succeed without my success being viewed as a commodity, and the freedom to fail without it being a disappointment to anyone but myself. It was a painful and brutal process, but I learned the most important lesson of my life. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Sometimes, the most definitive action isn't a loud confrontation, but a quiet cancellation. And sometimes, family isn't the one you're born into, but the one you build for yourself, based on trust, respect, and mutual care. They told me I didn't matter, and in the end, they were right. I didn't matter to them. But for the first time in a long time, I was starting to matter to myself. And for those of you listening to my story, if you find yourself in a similar position, constantly being drained by people who claim to love you, please hear this. You are not a resource. You are not an ATM. Your success is your own, and your peace is priceless. Setting a boundary is not an act of cruelty. It is an act of self-preservation. It may be the hardest thing you ever have to do, but I promise you, the silence on the other side is worth it.